So today I'm going to talk trees. Trees are one of those things that children, when they draw them, don't usually draw them very well. They don't draw them very lifelike, and if you just look at them for a little bit, they start to make sense. Children's drawings of trees are separated for me into two. You get the chocolate bar one, as I call it, which is basically a big rectangle with a small blob on the top, and then you get the farty one that looks like a cartoon fart. And neither of them are particularly accurate. So what I want to try and get you to think about is what trees actually look like. Trees are separated into three main parts. I'm ignoring leaves for now. If you look at a tree in winter, you'll see three parts. You'll see the trunk, which is the main bit that supports it. Then you'll see the branches, which is where it starts to spread out and split. And then the last bit are the twigs, which are the really fine little branches, basically, at the very top. And they are sort of in proportion. With a young tree, the tree trunk will be about half its size. As it gets older, it gets to a third, or maybe even less than that, depending on the sort of tree that you're looking at. There are lots and lots and lots of different sorts of trees as well. I'm just going for a sort of a generic deciduous tree, something like a London plane that you'll see, something that sheds its leaves every winter. Not something like a pine tree or Christmas tree or anything like that. Actually, it was Davinci. Leonardo da Vinci started looking at trees in the Renaissance, and he came up with a rule of the trees. It was called Da Vinci's Rule of the Trees. And he said, and this is a quote, "All the branches of the tree at every stage of its height, when you put them together, are equal to the thickness of the trunk." So if you imagine the trunk of a tree, if you had all the branches and you squish them together, they'd be the same size as the trunk. And same if you get all the twigs and you squish them together, that would be the same thickness as the trunk. And of course, that's the whole point of a tree. A tree is the shape it is, so that water can go up from the ground, from the roots, up the branch, or up the trunk, up through the branches and out to the leaves at the top. And it's called transpiration. It's the transport of water up and through the plant. So if you imagine one little tube that goes up to the end of a branch, and you imagine pulling all those tubes together, you'd end up with a trunk, which I think is important when you're doing it. The other thing about these trees is they're actually fractal. So if you have one part of a tree that you draw, that could actually be a whole tree, and you could reproduce that, making it smaller each time, and you'd still end up with a tree shape. Sounds confusing, I know, but I'm going to show you how I would draw it, and yeah, hopefully you'll be able to have a go and create something that's a little bit more lifelike rather than our blocks and our farty ones. Okay, so I'm going to do my tree, and I want my tree to be a grown-up tree, so I'm going to look for about this much to be this top bit. The trunk is going to be down here. So if I start with the trunk, a lot of trunks are not sort of this curved shape. They're not always like that. They are generally thicker at the bottom, but that'll do for now. The next part I'm going to do is I'm going to split it. And I'm not going to split it completely in half because I want this to sort of go up and then split again. So I'm going to split this into about a third. So 1/3 will go this way, and then 2/3 will go that way. This I can then split again. This is going to split into two this time. This can also split. And if you notice that this is in proportion with this. So this, even though it's wider, is a little bit longer than that. The next bit, before it splits again, and again, and again. Now this is going to have to be a bit bigger actually, I think, so I'm going to split this one like I did this one. I'm going to make this one into a little bit wider on this side, and this a bit thinner. If it's wider, it can go up higher, which means it can fill out the top. So you can see that as I go along, I'm starting to get this sort of gradual flow. And if you actually look at some twigs, this is twigs off a maple, an acer actually, you can see the way that it branches. There should have been another twig here actually. You have these sections here, and you can see that this section here, these are little nodes where the branches sprout from, but this section here is a little bit smaller than this section here, and this section here is a little bit it's about the same size actually as that. They, in general, they keep getting smaller. One thing about these aces though is they have very long tendrils on this bit, but you can imagine again, if you wanted to use this as a, you know, a mini tree, you could imagine that would split again and split again and split again. They also have more than one split on there, but I've only stuck to 2. So once you start to split your tree up like this, and you've split it up into all your little bits, then you start to see a proper tree shape happening. Now what I'm going to do as well now is I'm going to fill in some of the gaps with some other bits and pieces. So I might put one here, but a smaller one. I might put one here. But again, it sort of fits into this flow, into this, the shape of things here. And of course, when you get to the ends here as well, these can split even more. And so on and so forth, until you get to absolutely nothing. Now I've done that very quickly with a pencil, but obviously you can go over it with a pen afterwards and clear it up so it's not so scratchy, which I'm going to do now. Okay, so there's my tree that I've done. As you can imagine, if you take this one little bit here, that could be a mini version of the whole tree. That's the whole point. That's what I mean by fractal. One little bit here could become this bit, which could become this bit, which could become this bit. So that's that one done. Only thing I regret about this is doing it portrait. Apparently trees are limited to height. If they grow, they can grow about 150 meters high. And that's the maximum, because that's how far up they can pull water up their trunks. But there's no limit to width. So I think I'm going to have a go at one more, but I'm going to do it sideways and do it landscape and see how that turns out instead. That's my first go. Nice and easy. Okay, so here's my finished tree. I think definitely doing it portrait is good. You can see there is my trunk, and it starts to split up into the branches. The branches sort of go around here, and then eventually get to the twigs that go all around the outside. But every single time it splits, this gets thinner, so that and that add up to this, that, this and that add up to this, this and this and that add up to this. And it's that flow through a tree that you really want. Have a go and see what you can come up with. Don't worry about leaves yet. If you want to put some leaves on, you can. But have a go, see what you come up with.